Welcome back to Savage 911. So today we're going to get these front quarters to fit, and then we're going to start working on removing this panel. You can see there is a little bit of interference just here between the G-body bumper mounts and the F-body horn grille section. So this part, I've got two choices. Either I cut the bumper mounts out, which is quite a heavy gauge steel and a bit structural, or I cut out the thinner kind of cosmetic horn grille metal, and I think I'll do the lighter metal. It's probably better structurally. There's not a lot. It's about 30 mil too high, and as it swings down, we'll see how much clearance we've got. So I'm going to tackle that first, and then I'm going to grind back the underbody sealant here and expose the spot welds and see what I'm dealing with in terms of removing this panel. So that's the project for today. Okay, panel gaps round one on this front left quarter. How are we doing? Well, from a distance it looks pretty good. That lines up pretty well. It's kind of all bolted down. I've got to get some speed nuts, but that's fine. My cut at the front was pretty good, maybe a little bit too deep, but my angle is nice. And I've got a couple of kind of temporary bolts in there, you can see. Looks okay, but as you get closer, you'll see that gap is not very good. But then I discovered inside that there are actually some plates kind of behind. Maybe this one's easier to see. You can see there's some metal plates behind the hinges. So they've moved the door over a bit, towards the rear of the car a bit. So there is room to remove those spaces and get some play forward and even up the door. This looks okay down here, looks okay at the front. It's this little section here that needs a massage. However, there's no point getting this panel perfect until I've removed that front latch panel. Okay, so I'm going to use this pad. It's a purple pad for stripping, the stripping disc they call it. And I just want to kind of clean up this edge here so I can see the spot welds okay, so I know what I'm drilling out. Hopefully this doesn't produce a ton of dust. I know there will be a fair bit of dust, but it's relatively not too bad. So earmuffs, goggles, let's give it a shot. Okay, so we made a bit of a mess, and I definitely needed some PPE for that. I had sparks going everywhere and dust going everywhere. Nothing like inhaling a little bit of underbody treatment. But essentially I got there, so we've got, I went from all the way up here, ground down here, under, and it's a bit tricky in these corners. So essentially this panel comes down to a point just inside the curve. It has a little bit of the curve, maybe like 30 mil of curve, and then cuts across about here, and then starts up here. And there's a little bit of folding and spot welding and a little bit of mangled nastiness going on down here. Then across here actually was easier than I thought. So it is just, that's the lip there. You can see it really clearly now. I've ground it. Spot weld, spot weld, spot weld, spot weld. Plenty of spot welds. I don't know how many are there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22 spot welds across the bottom. So we're going to have to drill out every single one of those, which is going to be interesting. I'm now about 4 hours into this job of trying to take this front panel out. I wanted to give a quick update on why it's actually taking 4 hours and why it's a bit harder than I thought. So the top up here, I started at the top. The top was pretty straightforward actually. I drilled out the spot welds and it came free pretty much straight away. I'm using a 7mm cobalt drill bit for hardened steel. And happy days, was drilling it out, etc. And I got down to about here and then I kind of hit the first problem. It's hard to pull the steel out of the way because it's got a curve in it, and this was getting in the way, which is a later welded piece, so I had to cut this, and I'm ditching this panel anyway, so I don't care if and this piece of this panel is not even original, so I don't care about getting rid of that. Just more things to do. Then I got down to about here, and this panel on the inside actually wraps around a bit further, and I had to drill out a spot weld on the outside here, which meant taking back some of the underbody coating, etc. There is also a section behind this bracket which you can't really get to, where I don't think there's a spot weld there, but there's one just above and just below it. So I had to kind of get in and drill those. And then I got down to about here, and on this panel at least, and I reckon this is probably a later model thing, on this panel at least, they'd run a bead of, not just spot welds, but they'd run a bead of welding right along the join here. And you can see the steel is actually a lot cleaner. Up along here, there's actually a fair bit of surface rust inside the join, indicating to me that the spot welds were the only kind of joiner there, and there was still moisture getting into the area between the two panels. But down here, I guess they'd run extra welding to prevent water coming up from underneath and getting into the join, which makes sense. It's a good idea. It just makes it a lot harder to remove. So I'm kind of down to about here now. I actually had to use my trusty reciprocating saw with a metal bit just to drop that in from this way down that weld join to cut it out. And it was definitely welds because it was quite hard metal I should say. Here it's a little bit messy. There's basically like a panel corner goes in here from this center panel, but it's a bit messy because again there's a lot of welding bead down here, so I've got to figure out how to get that out. I've managed to get started with the cold chisel, separating this out, and we have some success. I can get the screwdriver like a fair way up in here, and I managed to get along the welds pretty okay. The problem appears to be that there's another weld that runs somewhere like along here on the inside that seals the panel, so that's the one that I'm not getting. I've got good access from the outside up into that box section, as you can see. From the inside, however, it's tricky. There is a row of spot welds along that lip and very difficult to access. So what I did is drop the reciprocating saw through that panel just above that lip to enable me to get the chisel in from above into the gap between the two panels. Well, I finally managed to get that panel out, and it required probably 100 holes, so 100 spot welds needed to be drilled out, and then chiseled essentially all the way down, all the way across the bottom, all the way up, which is what I knew. What I didn't know was in the G-bodies, they have this section behind, they have like a box section, and so there was actually another row of spot welds across the middle of that front piece that I had to drill out, and that was a bit painful. It's harder to get to, and you can see now it makes a lot more sense why the G-body front pressing has this ridge here, whereas the F-body one does not. See how it kind of the lines go, the pressing lines go all the way down to the bottom, whereas the G-body ones stop about kind of maybe 2/3 of the way down. That's because the G-body added a box section to the front panel for strength, which is good. And you can see here how that box section kind of sits behind. So that part is basically done, which was a real pain. Probably 6 to 8 hours worth of drilling and chiseling to get that out, which was painful. And then I'm like, okay, how is this new panel going to fit in? And what I realized is there's a bit of weaving that has to happen to get this panel in. So you can see on the top, this section goes to the edge, this section goes to the edge. However, I was intending, and the previous panel had this, the outer piece, going over the top. So how this meshes with these bits is a little bit TBD. And then when you get down to the bottom, so you're inside the sides, but you're in front of the bottom section. So this panel actually, and you can see why there's such a big gap in here on each side, because this panel actually has to slot into that gap so it fits behind this but in front of this, which is the real challenge. And then these have to mesh as well. So there's a lot of fiddling to get this to work. And then even once you've done that, do you have the width right? Is the hood going to latch into this section? So there's a fair bit of movement going on and a fair bit of metal work that still needs to happen. I'd say the good thing is, you know, this box section is a bit of G-body added safety at the front and strength, and so this will be the strongest F-body in the front section once I've finished welding it up. So that'll be good. Thank you for watching this episode, and next time, let's see if this panel fits and if I can get it adjusted. Thanks. See you soon.